What's up, you guys? It's Bombholtz here, back at it again with another FC25 video. Today, we're going to do an icon tier list. And with this tier list, I hope I can inform you guys of the best icons that are currently in the game right now with today's meta. Now, there's a lot of icons that are outdated, so there's a couple of evolutions that I'd go over with the lower rated icons, but with the higher and more relevant icons, they'll go up on the list. So sit back and relax and find out what are the best icons that you guys can currently use to add to your squad. Okay, to start out the tier list, we have base Vidic. Now this card comfortably sits between the B and C tier. However, if you evolve him with the Team of the Year Evolution center back, he sits in the S tier spot. Now we move on to Team of the Year Puskas. Being a Team of the Year Puskas owner myself, this card without a doubt sits in the S tier spot. Okay, so now we're moving on to On This Day Lampard. This card sits at the C tier. I know a couple people might have evolved him, but that card would still be at the B tier because I don't think it's enough to even have him sitting in the A tier spot. However, he has a Future Stars card, and that card is pretty solid. He sits in the A tier position here. Now we move on to base Hullet. Now this card sits comfortably in the A tier spot, and his Thunderstruck card is an easy S tier spot. He is deadly at the Shadow Striker position. He wins all the aerial battles, and he always gives everyone a nightmare going forward. Now we move on to Patrick Vieira. Now his base would sit at the A tier and B tier spot, but if you were to evolve him, he sits in that A tier spot comfortably. And he also has a Thunderstruck. This one is an easy S tier spot for me. Being a Vieira owner myself, he still gets the job done in February. Now we move on to base Petite. This card is an easy C tier spot, but if you were to evolve him with that Evo that was very popular, he's an S tier spot. He's very good as a holding center defensive mid, box to box, and left back. Okay, so I also forgot to add base Puskas. This card sits between A and B tier due to his 4-star, 3-star combo. Now we move on to Thuram. His card is pretty solid, but he's also fallen out of the meta. He sits between A and B tier, but if you're to evolve this Thuram, his card sits in the A tier spot. Now, with his Thunderstruck, easily one of the best fullbacks in the game. He's S tier for me. Okay, Cafu. This one should be pretty simple. His base is A tier and his Team of the Year is S tier. One of the best fullbacks in the game. Moving on, we have base Ronaldinho. This card is pretty good and fun to use in game. However, due to lack of player roles, he sits between the A and S tier spot. And with his promo card, he's an S tier position. He's very good at that inside forward role. And if his base card had that, he would have been chilling in the S tier spot as well. Okay, so this shouldn't be surprised. Team of the Year Pele, easy S tier spot, and base Pele, easy S tier spot in that role that he has for Shadow Striker. But if you were to play him anywhere else, he would sit comfortably between the A and S tier. But if you were to keep him at his preferred role, he's an easy S tier spot. Okay, base Laurent Blanc. This card's pretty solid, but he sits comfortably between the A and B tier. But if you were to evolve him, he's an easy A and S tier spot. Moving on, we have base Ribery. His card sits in the B tier spot, but if you were to evolve him, easy A tier spot, and his grassroots card, easy S tier spot, one of the best wingers to use in the game. Okay, so now we have Mia Hamm's Winter Wild card. Without a doubt, she's S tier, and her base card is S tier, and her Winter Wild card is between the A and S tier. And now with the chain evolutions that EA have released these past couple days, she would also be S tier if you were to give her the 94 shooting. So this card would also be in the S tier spot. But with this other card, I would put her between A and S tier if you were to use it just as is. On this day, Zanetti has also fallen out of the meta. He sits between the B and C tier. I've seen some people evolve him, but he still doesn't make that A tier spot. Okay, moving on, we have Buffon. Now we have base Buffon. This card sits between the A and S tier. I think there's a couple better goalkeepers to use now in the game. Now that we have more added play styles, this card would sit there right in this spot for me. On this day, Buffon sits comfortably between the B and C tier. I don't think he's very good as his base, and his Winter Wild card sits in the same spot as well. Okay, so now we have Sol Campbell Centurions. This card sits between the A and B tier spot, but I've seen some people evolve him to Team of the Year status. That card without a doubt is S tier. He's very hard to get past because of the added playstyles and boosted stats. Okay, moving on, we have Future Stars Johan Cruyff. Without a doubt, this is S tier, and his base card sits between the A and S tier spot. On this day, Johan Cruyff is between B and C tier because he's fallen out of the meta, but if we were to wait a couple days, he'd get a couple Evo chains. I've seen that you could boost his shooting to 91, but this card sits between B and C tier if you weren't to evolve. Now we have Centurion Zimbrata. This card sits between B and A tier. However, I've seen some people evolve in the CDM, and that card is between A and S tier. Now we have Grassroots Baggio. This card's actually a very good Baggio this year. I'd give him the S tier spot. And his other Globetrotters card sits between the B and C tier. Winter Wildcard Sawa, both of these cards easy S tier spot, and her base card is sitting between the A and B tier as she's also fallen out of the meta. Now we have Future Stars Peter Cech. This card is an easy S tier spot for me. He's very good to use in game. However, his base card sits between the A and B tier spot. Now we have Grassroots Roy Keane. This card's actually pretty somewhat decent. He sits at the A tier spot, and his Thunderstruck sits between the B and C tier spot. Winter Wildcards Makalele. His card was actually pretty fun to use in the beginning stage of the game, however he's fallen off. This card sits in the B tier spot. I've seen a couple people add Evo chains to him, which would make him barely holding in the A tier position. However, with card is, as of right now, this card's in the B tier spot. Centurion's Crespo, this card is D tier. Bowdy, her card is actually very good to use in game. She's an easy S tier box to box center mid. Thunderstruck Ashley Cole is actually somewhat decent to use in game. He sits comfortably between the A and B tier spot. After scrolling through so many pictures, I also forgot to add Winter Wildcard Bish. This card sits between the B and C tier spot. Xavi Alonso, his Future Stars card is actually somewhat nice to use in game. He sits at the A tier spot for me. And the on this day Xavi Alonso's fallen out of the meta so much he's in the C tier spot as well. Moving on, we have Future Stars Samuel Eto'o. This card without a doubt is in the S tier spot, and his base sits between the A and B tier. Centurion's Veron, D tier. Gattuso is also D tier. Winter Wildcards Kenny Dalglish sits between the A and S tier spot, and his 88 Winter Wildcard sits between the A and B tier spot. However, if you were to evolution chain this Dalglish, you could get him better shooting, better passing and dribbling, but with the card as is, this card sits between the A and B tier spot. Moving on, we have Centurion's Van der Sar. This card without a doubt is one of the best goalkeepers in the game still. He sits in the S tier spot, and his base sits between the A and S tier spot as well. Now we have Future Stars Yashin. This card's very good to use and go up against in game. This card is an S tier spot for me, and the base Yashin sits in the A tier spot. After browsing, I've finally found Centurion Frank Ribery. This card sits between the A and B tier spot. Now we move on to Waz's Thunderstruck. This card's in the A tier spot, and his base card sits between the B and A tier spot as well. I've seen a couple Evo chains, but it's not enough to get him in that A tier spot as of right now, so we'll have to wait and see. Okay, so we also have Team of the Year Gareth Bale. This card's an easy S tier spot for me at the winger or even at the striker role. He gets the job done, and his base sits between the A and B tier because it's fallen out of the meta due to the 3-star, 4-star combo. However, I've seen a couple Evo chains. It's still not enough for him to get to where he needs to be at. Okay, so moving on, we have Winter Wildcards R9. Both versions easy S tier spot, and his base is also in the S tier spot as he's easily top 5 strikers in the game. Now we have Future Stars Bobby Charlton. This card is very good to use in game at the Shadow Striker role. He sits in the S tier spot, and his base card sits in the A tier spot as well. Future Stars Rio Ferdinand, easy S tier spot as he's arguably top 5 center backs to use in the game, and his base sits in the A tier spot. However, if you're also to evolve him, he sits between borderline S and A tier spot as well. Grassroots Ian Wright, my brother packed him in game. He's very good. He sits in the S tier spot as we finally got a good Ian Wright to use within all the years he's been added to FIFA. Now we have Globetrotters Kaka. This card sits between the A and B tier because we're getting a lot better cards to use at that Shadow Striker role or Playmaker role, so that's where he stands, and his base would sit in the B tier spot. Future Stars Butragueño sits in the S tier spot, and his base sits between the A and B tier spot, but if you're to evolve him, I've seen a couple cool Evo chains. This card would sit in the A tier spot. Now we have Team of the Year Cantona. With that 5-star, 5-star combo, this card sits comfortably in the S tier spot, and his base would sit between borderline A and B tier. Thunderstruck Jarzinho sits in the A tier spot, and his base sits between the A and B tier spot. However, if you were to Evo chain and wait and see what happens to this card would sit in the A tier spot. Winter Wildcards Paul Scholes, D tier. Winter Wildcards Pires, C tier. I've seen a couple Evo chains, but it's not enough to get him in the A tier position. He'd still bump up to the B tier spot. Thunderstruck Luthar Mateus, without a doubt, S tier spot, and his base sits between the A and B tier spot. Again, another cool Evo chain I've seen added to Luthar Mateus. He would be sitting in the A and borderline S tier spot. Centurions Pavel Nedved sitting in the C tier spot as the usual. Same with Shevchenko and Pichon. They're not good enough to use in game. That's where they stand. Now we have the newest addition added to the game, Grassroots Maradona, easy S tier spot. I have not played his base, but I would assume he sits borderline A and S tier at this stage of the game due to the 5-star, 3-star combo. And his Grassroots cards, all of them that Evo chained together to get him to 92 rated, all in the S tier spot. I've tried all of them. They're all very useful to use in game. Now we have FC Pro Schweinsteiger. This card sits borderline A and S tier, and his Centurion sits in the C tier role. Winter Wildcards Hadji, C tier. Team Near Casillas. This card is an easy S tier spot for me. Ever since this new update, he's been saving everything. And Casillas' base would sit in the B tier spot. Loudrip sits in the C tier spot. Same with John Barnes. Thunderstruck Zidane, without a doubt, easy S tier spot. And his 2002 Team of the Year Zidane, this card 94 rated, S tier spot as well. However, if you are to have his 90, he sits in the A tier spot. His base is also in the A tier spot. Thunderstruck Ian Rush, D tier. Future Stars Garincha, one of the best dribblers to use in game, easy S tier spot, and his base would sit between the A and B tier spot. Winter Wildcards Prince, borderline B and C tier spot. Okay, as a Team of the Year Roberto Carlos owner, this card, easy S tier spot. He gets the job done. He's automatic. He is everywhere all over the pitch, and his base would sit in the A tier spot. Future Stars Nesta, he easily gets that A tier role. He's surprisingly good. Thunderstruck's Desai, easy A tier spot. He used to be S tier in the beginning stage of the game, but he's fallen out of the meta. He's not as automatic as he once was before. Centurions Ruud van Nistelrooy, C tier. Thunderstruck Riquelme, C tier as well. Now we have Globetrotters Maldini. This card is easily one of the best center backs to use in the game, S tier spot. Maldini's base, borderline A and S tier. Future Stars Fernando Torres, borderline A and B tier. Globetrotters Philip Lahm, B tier. Thunderstruck Fernando Hierro, easy A tier spot, and if you're to pair him with the Anticipate and Bruiser, he sits comfortably at the A and S tier role. Even with the lack of pace, he's still very automatic to use in game. Winter Wildcard Socrates, borderline A and B tier. Carlos Puyol, B tier spot. Team of the Year icon Eusebio, easy S tier spot as he's one of the best strikers used in the game. Eusebio's base card sits in the A tier spot. Team of the Year Miyama, I actually have her in my team. She's very good. Club legend, A tier spot. Thunderstruck Zico, easy S tier spot as he's one of the best shadow strikers and playmakers used in the game with that 5-star, 5-star combo. And Zico's base would sit in the A tier spot. Future Stars Patrick Kluivert, B tier position. Winter Wildcards Carlos Alberto, both versions S tier spot as they're very automatic. One at center defensive mid and the other at right back. One of the best cards you could use in the game. And Carlos Alberto's base would sit in the A tier spot. Team of the Year icon Henry, without a doubt, S tier spot, and his base in the A tier spot. Future Stars Robin Van Persie, borderline A and B tier. Alan Shearer, borderline A and B tier as well. Centurions David Beckham, B tier spot. Team of the Year icon Cannavaro, easy A tier spot. However, he does not have the height that you would want, but he's still pretty automatic to use in game. Grassroots Stoichkov, A tier spot. And we have Future Stars Luis Figo. He's still not as good in game as people would like. He sits borderline A and B tier. Found Centurions Foudy after going through so many icons. Now we're cleaning up the list. She sits in the B tier spot. Future Stars Pirlo, Great Valley SBC, he gets that A tier spot. Winter Wildcard Xavi, easy A tier spot as he still holds up pretty well to use in game. Team of the Year Ronald Koeman, he's somewhat decent to use at center back. He doesn't get the job that I would want done at that role, but as a center defensive mid, he's actually very good to use in game. Future Stars Bobby Moore, borderline A and B tier due to the lack of pace. He's not formatted like a Cannavaro card. If he had like 85 or even 88 pace, he would be sitting in the A tier spot. Future Stars Shellen, she sits borderline A and B tier. Future Stars George Best, fun card to use in game. He sits in that A tier spot. I wish he'd be a lot better to use out wide, but at the cam role, he is deadly. Thunderstruck Smith, she sits in the B and A tier spot. Del Piero also sits borderline A and B tier. Gerd Muller, also B tier spot. Winter Wildcards Rivaldo, he's actually fun to use in game. He sits in that A tier spot with that 99 physicality. Grassroots Drugba, he sits borderline A and S tier. Thunderstruck Raul sits at the B tier spot. Globetrotters Baresi, C tier spot. He's not formatted properly to even be usable in game. Team of the Year Abili, she sits borderline A and S tier as a playmaker role. And there you have it. That is my tier list for all the icons that are still relevant for February. What do you guys think? Let me know in the comment section below. That'll be it for today's video. Make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel for more FC25 content. Be sure to hit that bell button so you guys don't miss out on the next uploads. Also, tell your friends to subscribe to my channel so it could grow. And be sure to check the description and follow me on X as the link is down below. But that'll be it for today's video. Hope you guys enjoy. I'll see you guys in the next upload.